Hola, ¿qué tal? Les habla Raf Delgado. Quiero invitarlos a que me acompañen en este programa, La Constitución Americana. Hello, I'm Raf Perales. Welcome to Leyes Cotidianas, or Everyday Law, where we talk about the laws that affect you every day. Today we're going to be discussing the topic of Arizona law. And we're going to be having the second part of a show that we started last week. And I have the pleasure of having Mario Delgado, an economist, to join us today. Welcome, Mario.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
And of course, we have Charles Kuck back with us, an immigration attorney with Kuck Immigration Partners.
Great to be back, Ralph. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Charles. And Charles, let me start with you and do a little recap from last week's show. And let's talk about this Arizona law briefly and exactly what are the most important provisions of this law, or the most controversial provisions of this law.
The key provisions of this law are four. One, they require everybody who's not a citizen to carry their identification with them at all times, proving who they are. Second, it allows police to arrest people because they look undocumented. Three, it requires individuals to be, how do you say this? Help me out here, Ralph. It would, God, I'm sorry, I just...
You blanked out on
I blanked out on
the
fourth.
Absolutely. Okay, so obviously carrying papers,
yes,
they must do that. If they stop for a violation...
stop for a violation, they're required to check their immigration status at that time.
Okay. Okay, and of course, you know, the profiling.
Yes, and it also allows the police to stop somebody for an immigration violation alone, even though they may have committed no other criminal violation, thus putting police in the position of, local police, in the position of being immigration officers.
Of course, you know, we're just kind of commingling the state with federal jurisdictions.
Exactly,
here.
That's what they're trying to do is, and you hear this all the time, we're just mirroring federal law because the federal government's not enforcing law, which of course is a lie. And the reality is you can't have the states enforcing this law. And a federal court judge in Arizona found that these four provisions specifically were unconstitutional and they were preempted by federal law.
Okay. And of course, here in the state of Georgia, there's already some bills that have been pre-filed in the legislature, and I'll let our audience know that, you know, we're pre-taping before the legislation starts. And briefly tell us about, do you know what it is that they're trying to do here in Georgia?
Oh, they're basically trying to mirror the Arizona law. They keep talking about the fact that they want to draft a law that is not going to be unconstitutional. But there's no way to include these four provisions in that law without it being unconstitutional. What I think they're going to do ultimately is put in what are basically these laws and then let the chips fall where they may. Challenge them, go to court, and they'll fight them in court here.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, Mario, as an economist, of course, there's been much talk about, you know, the effect that these laws would have, not just at the state level, but at a national level. But let's sort of set up the scenario a little bit and tell us, I mean, what effect does immigration have on the economy overall? I mean, obviously it's become a very important part of our economy here in the United States.
Immigration, Ralph, as we all know, has been a vital role in the growth, economic growth of the nation, way back to the foundation of the nation. Immigrants have come and developed different infrastructures, different industries in the economy. Two aspects that they have. First, let me back off a second before I answer that. To me, it's illogical, if not irrational, that in an economy that we have today, teetering economy, we're going to play around with one of the issues that has to do with one of the most productive and most economical components of the workforce, the immigrant labor, especially the first generation immigrant labor. That's illogical. And second, that now we're pursuing the businesses, stopping them, delaying them, fining them when we need business to grow, not to die. So from that standpoint, it's crazy.
But how do you, before you continue, how do you respond to those who say, but, you know, because of the state of the economy today, the high unemployment, the lack of growth, it is precisely why we have to get rid of all these immigrants that are taking jobs away?
Two things to that. Quick question. Since when reducing the numbers of factors of production increases any economy? It's the opposite. You want to increase the availability of factors of production, so of inputs, of which labor is one, to grow an economy. Second, all the statistics have shown that an immigrant brings average for the nation 1.25 jobs for the ones that they take. And the jobs that they bring in many cases are superior jobs to the menial jobs that most of the time they take. So it's an irrational, it's illogical, it doesn't fit, doesn't make sense. Now, the ones that are anti-immigrants for reasons other than economic reasons will ignore that. We'll call it a statistical lies. But the facts, the ones that believe it and the ones that have conducted, realize that it doesn't make sense. It's destroying the nation. For political games, we're destroying the foundations of the nation. In a global economy like we have right now, not only that keeps weakening the industrial composition of the nation, but it's giving us an image at the global level of an immature, almost a banana republic mindset, when we're willing to destabilize the economy for some political gains at the local level.
Well, and picking up on that point, Charles, I mean, it seems to me, just reading on a newspaper, that there's a lot of anti-immigrant feeling all over the world, or at least
there is,
the developed world, Europe, you know, and the United States. So, I mean, is this really going to affect, at a global level, the United States when other nations are going perhaps through the same pains? Mario.
Well, other nations, depend who you put in that category. If we put Europe, if we put some of the Western nations, yes. But if you talk to Asia, first they don't have to worry about immigration to begin with. They're kind of a uniform type population. They have the size, they have the strength, so they don't have to contend with that. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure from a globally competitive standpoint, they are happy that we're involved in this nitpicking penny any type contention while they continue growing.
Well, and of course, if we don't have the adequate labor supply here, you know, the production goes to Asia.
Correct, exactly. And it's going on. It's been happening.
Right.
It's constantly going. It will continue increasing as we do. What we need to do is, on the contrary, facilitate the flow of resources here and make it amenable for them and profitable for them to come and balance out the loss that we've been incurring for the last few years in the process.
All right. Chuck, are you seeing any effects on the H-1B visas? And of course, let's explain that is the skilled
labor. The people with bachelor's degree. Absolutely. Companies here have been, the government has made it very difficult to hire an H-1B today. They've raised the fees recently. They've dramatically made more difficult the process of getting somebody approved. And what does that do? That says to a company, I'll just hire somebody abroad and keep them abroad. When a company hires a foreign employee, that means they're not paying taxes here, they're not buying houses here, they're not buying cars here. We're losing a major component of our society because we're making it harder and harder for people to come here. It makes literally no economic sense for us to be doing this.
Let me give you some figures on that in Arizona, a little bit that I have from Arizona. Arizona have lost already 100,000 workers, immigrant workers, that left the state. They also have lost in just entertainment and convention businesses over $500 million.
Now, is that because of the boycott?
Yes. Kind of. But let me ask something else that no figures have been developed yet. But I'm pretty sure it's going to happen in Arizona. It's going to happen anywhere in the nation where there is a threat for undocumented immigrants to be persecuted. It's the fact that many of them, if I had a family, I would do the same, get away from the open economy and go into the underground economy, where we'll have a lower profile. And what would that mean? Paying less taxes. What would that mean? Getting less labor help in developing the meaningful sectors of the economy.
Well, let me ask you this, obviously anecdotally, you know, as a lawyer, just, you know, meeting folks. I've seen a lot of contraction, as you see in the immigrant community, that they just don't want to go out and, you know, go shopping or go to the movies or go to the restaurant because of the fear that they have. Are you seeing those in the numbers? Are you seeing that, you know, sort of filter in the economy, where in fact it's having an effect?
To a degree of having an effect, quantifiable effect, I haven't seen it, I haven't read anything yet. Not that it's not happening. Anecdotally, yes, I've seen cases where people have not taken advantage, even because let's remember that illegal immigrants are many times part of a legal immigrant family. They are components, they are mixed. So when you have the loss of one, you have the loss of legal members of society. In many cases, I have seen situations where they have moved away from the opportunity of participating in a national program because they have members that were undocumented and they were afraid that we'll lose that investment or that participation because they had.
And with that thought also, let me throw it to Chuck, because many folks, you know, what I read in the editorial pages or in the letters to the editors say, take the approach of, well, why can't they just be here legally? I mean, it's almost as if it's a choice that they want to be here undocumented.
Why don't they go to the post office, Ralph, and just get a green card?
Well, and so, you know, what Mario's saying is that it's very true that you have very families that are mixed. You know, half may be documented U.S. citizens, the other half may not be for circumstances, you know, many circumstances. So why can't the half that is not become legal documented, since they already have a father or a mother or a cousin or a brother or somebody who is? It's
really quite clear. In 1996, Congress passed a law that said if you came into the country illegally, you can't ever get legal here, you have to go home. Fine, have somebody go home and fix their papers. But Congress also said at the same time that if you leave after you've been illegal, you can't come back for 10 years. Do you know anybody who would send their spouse away for 10 years? I don't.
Now, the intent of that law obviously was to discourage people in the first place.
And clearly it didn't work. What it did do, if you look at the numbers of undocumented immigrants in 1996 when it passed, when there was about 2 million, and you look at the numbers today where there's 12 million, clearly the law was not effective. We have a broken law. And we're going back to what Mario said, there are over 3 million families today in the United States where a spouse is a citizen, and but for this law, could sponsor them.
Well, and that's an interesting point too, Mario, if you want to comment on that.
Well, I want to comment on something related to that, the economic aspect on the agricultural sector. I want to throw some statistics, but go ahead and finish.
But I tell you what, let's take a quick break right now, and we're going to come back in just a second.
Desde el momento en que ellos llegan a nuestras vidas, dan su primer paso, aprenden a andar en bicicleta. Hasta la preparación de su primer día del 5º grado es un reto para todos los padres criar un hijo saludable. Permítanos guiarle a través de un embarazo seguro y feliz. Aprenda sobre salud, nutrición e información educativa relacionada con el desarrollo de su hijo. Padres e Hijos Atlanta, una publicación del mundo hispánico. Recoja su copia gratis hoy. ¿Cuál es su tesoro más preciado?
Discussing the Arizona immigration law with Mario Delgado, an economist, and Charles Kuck, an immigration lawyer. And Mario, let's talk about the impact that these laws have, or immigration in general has, on small businesses and here in Georgia as well.
Small businesses, as we all know, are essential to provide competition, quality, and low prices to the economy. For a small business, labor is one of the key ingredients, one of the key inputs. If you're going to make labor more expensive, what are you going to do to that level of competition and quality of product? It's going to diminish. You're going to end up killing not only in urban businesses, but also in rural businesses too, the farmers. Farmers historically been known to be struggling. They know that the Farm Acts that began in the 1933 helped more eventually develop and helped more the large farmers. The small farmers are barely scratching a living. In many cases, they need to go to the urban sector to make ends meet.
And agriculture is a very important,
essential.
Is the largest industry in Georgia.
Nation, not only for Georgia, but also for surplus for our national economy. Trade surplus, one of the key industries that have been providing us surplus throughout these years, is the agricultural sector. Now, what is going to happen to the small farmer? The small farmer, if you increase a little bit more the cost, it's going to fail. It's going to have to do what? It's going to have to sell its land. To who? Well, perhaps large farmers, perhaps developers. Perhaps those two groups are behind some of these immigration measures, hiding behind the anti-terrorist, anti-immigrant front. So we're going to damage the small segment of the economy. And another thing that is ironic, especially for the agricultural sector, we have the new agricultural secretary promoting the growth of small farmers because they provide local product, naturally grown, environmentally sensitive, safe. What's going to happen? We're going to kill those farmers. So, I mean, at many levels, it's not coherent what is taking place.
And these farmers get this because they have voted just this last week to not endorse this Arizona-style law here in Georgia. And they've gone to the state legislature and said, as part of the Growers Association, do not pass this law. This is going to kill us here in Georgia.
And Chuck, I want you to address something as an immigration lawyer, because it seems to me that there's a bit of a almost division in our immigration laws. I mean, agriculture has always been treated specially in a way than the rest of the immigration population, because you have special visas, temporary visas that allow farmers to hire workers for 10 months or 6 months or whatever the cyclical farming business requires. So are they impacted as much?
Oh, absolutely, because these visa programs don't function properly. They don't get the right workers to the right place at the right time, and there simply aren't enough of them. The overall problem with our visa, our legal immigration system, is that it's dysfunctional and it actually causes undocumented immigration. Would people really choose to come illegally if there was a valid visa to come here to work in agriculture? Of course they would. Nobody wants to be undocumented.
Or construction, or whatever the industry
Nobody wants to be
require.
that. But our legal immigration system doesn't meet the current demands of our society, and there's no hope of meeting it into the future unless it's changed quickly.
Okay.
Let me give you some ramifications, the economic ramifications of hurting the rural sector that we will if Georgia implements it. For example, before I go into what is going to happen to the urban sector of the economy, the Georgia economy, the number of farms in Georgia with 70 to 99 acres is 11 times larger than the one in Arizona. In Arizona, the average size of the farm is over 1,000 acres. In Georgia, 202. So Arizona will not be impacted that much by reduction in the workplace because the farms are already large enough to absorb technology. Not in Georgia. That size of farm requires quite a bit of labor to supplement the family labor. Mm-hmm. So automatically we're going to affect the output. Automatically we're going to affect the economic growth of the rural sector. Another big difference between Arizona and Georgia, Georgia has almost 3 times the size of the rural population that Arizona has. The impact is going to be much larger. And guess who buys manufactured products from the urban areas? But the rural sector too. Mm-hmm. There is a feedback back and forth. So the impact is going to be magnified in Georgia over whatever has been happening in Arizona. In the agricultural sector, Arizona is smaller, and I wouldn't be surprised if the industrial urbanized sector is the same thing. It doesn't make sense for Arizona, it doesn't make sense for us, doesn't make sense for the nation as a whole, because those economic principles applied across the board.
But it seems to me, based on what you're saying, Mario, that is part of the problem of the immigration, is that as a nation, states have different interests, which may be driven by their economy. Mm-hmm. Obviously the economy of Georgia, being more agricultural, as you say, is different than New Hampshire, or perhaps out west. And so the question then is, should our immigration policy have to take into account that, which I don't think it has to this point, by coming up with some kind of guest worker program that meets the needs of each state separately, while at the same time the needs of the country.
Yeah, in fact, the state of Utah is actually moving forward with their own kind of mini plan on this, trying to get permission from the Department of Labor and from the Immigration Service to have an agreement with a state of Mexico to import the necessary labor to work on their farms, work in their factories, to respond immediately to that need. But that's not going to pass because Congress is never going to let control of immigration go to a state level. But until Congress fixes the current system, which does not meet anybody's needs, we're going to continue to have undocumented people coming to the United States. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, we have spent more on the border in the last 10 years than we'd spent in the 220 years before that, and we still have people coming in undocumented. When folks talk about sealing the border, it's an impossibility until you fix the legal system. People will much rather come legally than illegally.
Well, Mario, let's just talk about it in general, about the economic impact that immigration has had in the state of Georgia as a whole, not just because of these laws and what may happen. I mean, has it been good? Has it been bad? I mean, from an economist's point of view?
Well, for any state, immigration, labor immigration is always productive. If they were not productive, if they were not valid, they wouldn't find jobs. So if they are here, if they are employed, they are needed.
But what about the argument of wage deflation? That undocumented aliens or low-skilled labor is bringing down the wage.
In some of the jobs that some level, some degree, or some type of immigrants have come to work in. Yes, they have. But by the growth it has created, has inflated wages in other components of that economy. So net, immigrants have improved the wage rates for the nation as a whole. In some specific industries, they might have lowered a little bit, but usually are the ones that no one else wants to work and leave it for the illegal immigrants or first-generation immigrants to take, because nobody else wants it and provide. I was watching the other day on TV. It was very, there was on Edgar Moore came out with a film in the, I forget, it was in the 50s, covering about agricultural labor. There were poor whites and poor blacks, and how the productivity was low. And that's very important. It's not only the wages, it's the productivity, because that's one of the things that many of the first generation immigrants have, a high level of productivity, high octane work is shown, definitely. And that reduces the cost even more outside the lower wages that they get. But they show the improvement when they had, in this case, particular case, when Latino came in to work in the fields, how the productivity went up. How the quality of the product coming out went up. And they compare filming.
I'll tell you what's remarkable today, that even though we have the Arizona law and other laws like it going in the United States, people aren't coming in to fill these jobs. You and I aren't telling our kids, I want you to drop out of high school and start plucking chickens. Nobody is doing that. So there are certain jobs that only immigrants will do today, regardless of how bad the economy is.
And you bring a good point, because as Mario mentioned early on, you know, we live in a global economy, and we're competing with labor in Asia or other parts of the world that is much lower, and that's causing a lot of these jobs to go out. And so why not have, you know, that labor here in the United States at a lower cost? Because you're right, I mean, I don't think many people are going to encourage their kids to drop out of high school so they can go pluck chickens.
Or pick Vidalia onions, or do anything like that. We're just not training our kids to do that. We're training
does that make sense as an economist?
It does, and let me give you another scenario what's going to happen. If we don't do that, the surviving businesses are going to have to replace labor with what? With technology. And technology is the true blue replacer of labor for good.
Well, and there's another white elephant in the room, I think, which is the baby boomers you haven't mentioned. I'm surprised, which, you know, that's a tremendous amount in the workforce that is phasing out, as, you know, as we speak, is retiring, and over the next, you know, 20 years, you're going to see a tremendous number. And somebody needs to fill in that gap.
Well, we can't just shrink the economy? No, clearly we're not going to shrink the economy. We are literally, every day that Congress fails to act on fixing the system is another day we're behind the 8 ball.
On an H-1B visa that we mentioned a while ago, I believe there was a circumstance where a company actually wanted to start a division here, but ended up...
It was actually, what you're speaking of is Microsoft. They couldn't get enough H-1B workers in here because we have our annual cap, so they literally built a brand new facility in Vancouver, British Columbia, right across the border, and hired 150 engineers. These are guys making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year in Canada, doing the same exact thing they would have done in the United States if they could have gotten visas.
So not only one job went, but several.
Plus the support jobs and the houses and...
and 10 seconds.
Gates testified to Congress to that effect. And what is Congress doing?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Right. Unfortunately.
So the states are at fault. The Congress is the culprit.
Okay. We're going to have to wrap it up. And Mario Delgado, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Chuck Kuck, welcome back. Come back and talk to us. Hopefully, you know, as we see some of this play out, you know, we'll have to come back and see what happened. Appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Remember, joining us next Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Until then, y'all behave, or you're going to need a lawyer.
Leyes Cotidianas les llega a ustedes gracias al generoso apoyo financiero de la Fundación de Justicia Civil del Estado de Georgia. Mundo Hispánico, el vocero de la comunidad hispana desde 1979.